nature. One of, if not the finest, of God's creations given to mankind. Beautiful, elegant, and dangerous. In mankind's many attempts to conquer nature, we found that some things are better left unknown. Cheeky teleporter spots, bizarre flank routes, death pits and cliffs at every turn. All of these things and more can make us professionals conclude that it came from upward.
That's another one. That's another one. No! No! Who doesn't love Upward? Quite obviously, the best map is Upward. Don't let those big YouTubers make you think otherwise. This guy said Steel was the best map? Huh? This sort of nonsense has plagued the mainstream TF2 media. The people need a independent thinker, such as myself, to give them a proper analysis of the most alpha male map you can play in Team Fortress 2. Let me explain. Generally speaking, Upward is a payload map, which means that it's the job of blue team to push the cart to points A, B, C, and D in order to win the game. This means that it's red team's job to prevent blue team from pushing the cart as far as possible until the round ends. If blue team is unable to push the cart to the final point before the timer runs out, then red team wins that round. Like most game modes in Team Fortress 2, before the start of each round, the red team will get roughly 1 minute to set up their defenses, which includes building Uber, coming up with strategies, and creating buildings such as sentries or dispensers. In the meantime, blue team will just sit comfortably in their spawn until the round starts. However, it is important to note that they can also build Uber and come up with strategies of their own, such as... And welcome back to Camp That Teleporter. That's right, we see who's stupid enough to take the teleporter this time around. But you may be wondering,
Ranger, how does one play this magnificent map?
shh, don't worry, I got you. Victory does not come easy in a map like Upward, unless the other team is stupid. Which is exactly why you need a plan. You would think that the strategies for both teams would be completely different since they both have different goals. But of course, much like that one guy you knew in high school, both teams are going to be copying each other's homework, so to speak. For example, both teams, even in casual, are going to have at least one of the following: a medic, 3 to 4 power classes, and 3 snipers, cause this game sucks. Wait, hold up. What are you doing in here? Are you mad about what I said earlier about sniper? Well, it's true. I see, give me 1 second. Alright. Maybe that last part was a bit of exaggeration, but you get my point. Let's talk about strategies you can use on offense, or the blue team. While one can come up with many different strategies to use when winning on offense, the 3 that I like to categorize are fight, flight, and funny. Let's start with the first strategy, fight. This strategy, in my opinion, is the most straightforward and probably the most successful one you could have on offense. This strategy involves being as aggressive as you can, as quick as you can, so you can easily steamroll the enemy team. Let me give you an example. On offense, it's very useful to have at least more than one medic on your team. You can have one of them use stock and another use something that isn't stock. Quick fix, vaccinator, crits, I don't care. The reason for this is so you can increase the unpredictability of the strategy, and on top of that, you get to fine-tune the strategy to your team's liking. The medic who is not using the stock medigun will immediately Uber out of spawn to catch the enemy team off guard or to negate some damage. But Ranger, who am I going to Uber? I can hear you asking. And don't worry, because I know who. The Heavy. Come on, fellas. Heavy on cart is busted. That guy gets on a cart, boom. You won the game. Maybe you'll have an extra teammate on the cart here and there, but it's not important. What I find really effective is taking that stock medic that you have earlier and making him go with one or two other teammates who are going either to the right or the left of the cart and conduct a small push to destroy any and all sentries or other major defenses that red team has and successfully capture the first point. A crucial part to this strategy is incorporating some kind of gatekeeping of the other team. Otherwise, the quick and fast part of the strategy will not really come into play as much. This is exactly why, before or after you capture that first point with your team, you want to get your soldiers, your scouts, or demos, or any really mobile class. You want them to go on over to B, to where the other team's spawn is, and not necessarily camp them, but just sort of push them back so they can't set up. It is very important that if you're doing this to B, you also want to make sure that your team is doing this to C as to maximize the quickness of the fight strategy. And then lastly, for D, you get all, or at least most of your team, to go into the cart, push the team back to their spawn, and ultimately win the game. But, and this is important, while the strategy can be very effective, it's very hard to pull off. This is because the strategy is very reliant on two things: the skill of your team and the coordination of your team. In other words, if your team isn't at a decent skill level or you guys are not coordinating properly, then the strategy isn't really going to work out for you. This map also requires a fair bit of knowledge of not only the map upward, but of classes, weapons, and mechanics as well. But hey, at the end of the day, if you guys are fairly good at the game and you just want that quick and easy win so you can level up, then the fight strategy is definitely for you. Alright, Doc, you ready? Alright. Now. Oh, I'm stuck. Next, there's the flight strategy. This is the strategy you're going to use if you and your team want to play a bit more passively instead of more aggressively. This obviously doesn't sound quite as appealing as the fight strategy, because that's the strategy where you want to be aggressive and you are an offense after all, but just hear me out. For this strategy, you definitely want to minimize a lot of your power classes, not get rid of them, but just shorten them down, so to speak. This is done so you can emphasize more on other classes that will prove to be more useful for your team, such as engineers, demos, snipers, and maybe medics as well. Unlike the previous strategy we just mentioned, this strategy involves slower pacing so that you and your team can easily gather more info about the other team. Personally, I find this strategy a lot easier to execute, especially for newer players who are still having a hard time analyzing everything. However, the main problem you run into with this strategy is that, while yes, you and your team are having more time to think about what you're going to do next, when you do that, you risk the possibility of you and your team losing as the timer will go on and on and on, and at some point you're going to lose if you keep doing that. If you know that you and or your team aren't really that good at the game, then I would highly recommend this strategy. Alright guys, we've been waiting for a little while, but I think I'm going to push now. Don't worry, we'll regroup and think about it. Alright, I waited 2 more minutes. We really thought about it this time, fellas, but I think we can actually push. Okay, I'm gonna uninstall this game, and for the last strategy, we have the funny strategy. Now, this strategy is very high risk, high reward, in the sense that you're playing in a very chaotic way. This is simply because, unlike Overwatch, which requires you to be practically glued to your teammates and while taking several amounts of copium every second, TF2 allows you to play by your own rules every now and then. This strategy involves things like absurd class stacking, hitting your fellow man with the 3rd degree. From there, sky's the limit, really. The strategy is very flexible. But despite the strategy being very fun and funny, it is unpredictable at the end of the day. Sure, you guys will be throwing off the enemy team more often, but since you guys aren't really working together, it'll definitely hurt you in the long run when you're trying to, win. Then again, it is Team Fortress 2 we're talking about, so if you really just want to have fun and hang loose, then I would highly recommend this strategy. And that concludes the strategies you can use on offense. Now we can move on to defense, or the red team. Now, as I mentioned before, the two teams are going to be copying each other's homework every now and then. What this boils down to is that red team, much like blue team, can also make use of the fight, flight, or funny strategies mentioned before. But when it comes to defense, there are some slight key differences. The main difference is that the strategies are going to be more passive than they were before. This isn't really any major surprise, since on red, you're trying to defend in the first place, and if you're too aggressive, then you can't really do that. Because of this, it's a great idea to invest a lot more in engineers and heavies on defense, because those guys are better at locking down the area. Hey, but between you and me, if you really want to go more in depth about how well engineer can be on red team, then I would highly recommend watching Uncle Dane's video on how to play engineer on Upward. He does a good job of breaking down how engineer can take advantage of this masterpiece of a map. As for heavy, I find it very effective on defense to just stick with your team. Otherwise, you're going to get picked off very easily. If you have any other troubles with heavy, rather that be positioning or weapon choice, then you can head on over to Big Joe's channel and he'll give you the rundown. The second difference is that red team can make a lot better usage of some of the more interesting spots in Upward. Wow, you guys suck. Come to think of it, there are quite a lot of interesting spots to be found on Upward, but this video has gone on long enough as it is, so I'll be saving those for a later date. Don't worry though, sometime in the future I'll make a follow-up video about the specific areas in the map that you can make use of. If you guys ever want me to go more in detail about the strategies you can use on red or blue team, then make sure you let me know.
Well, it looks like there are some things that simply can't be solved yet. Make sure you stay tuned for It Came From Upward.